While the angst surrounding the BYU men's basketball program is completely understandable after 4 straight losses, there are some very simple things the Cougars can do to turn things around.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, 14-year credentialed media member at BYU, your resident expert and insiders, your host here. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And thank you for making all of us at Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk BYU basketball in the aftermath of another 4th straight loss. What do the Cougars need to do to get things back on track, and how parallel is the season tracking to last year? We'll get to all of that. And we'll also talk some BYU football. In the aftermath of the Super Bowl last night, I noticed a trend that BYU is trying to absolutely own as a member of the Big 12 Conference, and it's something that they saw firsthand as well this past football season, that if they can master it, will lead them to the heights they hope to achieve in the Big 12 and beyond. We'll dig into that. And then we'll finish up talking about the Big 12 actually being spurred to action when it comes to anti-LDS chants and why it's finally time that they stamp it out for good. And we'll get to all of that ahead on today's show. And it's all brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. Of course, it's all brought to you by FanDuel, where you can play your game. All right, so BYU basketball has now lost 4 straight games, 5 of their last 6. They sit at 5-5 in the Big 12 Conference, and I understand that a lot of you probably are like, what in the world's going on with this basketball team? And in fact, I'm thinking that same thing. And I was sitting there on Saturday night on press row watching this game unfold, and it felt like it was yet another game that BYU could let slip through their fingers. They could have notched another signature win. It follows what happened against UConn, reeling back in Arizona and having a chance there. The chance against Kansas and this latest one against Houston. BYU's right there. They have had numerous opportunities to notch what I would call a signature win. One of those wins that when it comes to the NCAA tournament selection process could see you seated in the top 4 versus being a middling seed. Those are the type of games BYU aspires to win, needs to win, and if they want to achieve this year's aims, well, they've got to start winning them very, very soon. The biggest thing that I notice from this BYU basketball program right now is they are not doing some of the very, very simplest things that lead to success on a basketball court, and in fact, it's not just a recent development. Think about it. We've talked ad nauseum about perimeter defense. We've talked about rebounding woes. We've talked about their lack of interior scoring, different things we've talked about. For those of you who are everydayers on this podcast, and if you're not, welcome to the show. But the bigger point is, you look at that Houston game. You missed 12 free throws. You lost by 11. Now, I'm not expecting BYU to go perfect from the free throw line. That obviously does not exist in reality very often, but you need to shoot better than 57% and change from the charity stripe. Sorry, that's a simple ask. And I asked the question to Kevin Young Saturday night, and I asked, is there anything you can do outside of shooting? He said, no. That's all he gave me in terms of a response, because he's frustrated with that. The other thing is, don't give up 4 extra offensive possessions to the Houston Cougars in 5 defensive possessions in the second half. Remember, 4 offensive rebounds for the Houston Cougars generated extra looks and really put this game to bed for Houston. BYU has to find a rebound, and I don't remember who it was on social media on Saturday night, and I completely agree with it. BYU brings in guys like Keita. They have brought in a G League center in Abdullah Ahmed, and somehow, someway, a 6'5" guard from Riverton, Utah, speaking of Richie Saunders, is still their best rebounder. Richie is tenacious. He is absolutely fantastic and had a really rough night as the focal point, it appeared, of Houston's defensive philosophy. I think Houston decided, you know what? We're going to take Richie out of this game plan. And if it's like kind of a tripod for BYU, to use the expression, we're going to take that one leg away. And if the other 2 legs can beat us, so be it. And Kelvin Sampson essentially acknowledged that very thing in the post-game press conference. And Richie still needs to show better. Other things they can do that are very simple, I think, to fix their woes as a basketball team for BYU is get Keita and Abdullah Ahmed, I don't know, making more than 1 or 2 baskets a game. And I'm not expecting a lot in terms of the free throw percentage from those guys. They're big men. And in this day and age of college basketball and in basketball in general, big men are kind of given a pass when it comes to free throws. But Kevin Young said, you're being too kind to these guys when asked about their woes from the field. We saw Keita airball a shot from, if it was more than 3 feet away from the basket, I'd be for it. He airballed it. He airmailed it over the top of the hoop. I don't know what it's going to take, but I would encourage these guys to go out there and, given the opportunity, stop trying to lay it up. Just jam it. And if you get blocked, so be it. I'd rather respect the fact that you tried to yam it on somebody versus you have a chance to have it glance off the glass like Keba did, have it just go completely miss the rim. Just try and jam on these guys. These two are expected to be really, really quick second jumpers. And what that means is when you touch the ground, you're right back up in the air. You know what? Utilize that. And Kevin's got preternatural ability as a leaper. I'd like to see him try and jam it on more people. I also saw some other people. I think it was Robbie McCombs mentioned it on Saturday night. The Keita, his chief threat in the pick and roll scheme is a lob threat. And as Tim Lacombe also pointed out, in 36 minutes of action on Saturday night, Rob Wright had one assist. He's your point guard, y'all. You need to have more production from him. And what I noticed from Rob is he is very good about getting into traffic. He's very good about getting towards the rim, but for some reason, the head is not up. I don't know what it is. His vision is clouded. He's not getting the ball out. Like I said, these are pretty simple things. And anybody who's played basketball at any level, and I don't proclaim to be a basketball expert, but if I can understand this stuff, I guarantee Kevin Young can understand it. I guarantee every player in the BYU basketball program understands it. And what you have to focus on is executing those simple things. Your next opportunity to snap what is now a 4-game slide is tomorrow night at Baylor. Now, that's much easier said than done going on the road because, as we've learned, going to Oklahoma State last Wednesday, every road game in the Big 12 is not a given. It just simply is not. Baylor may not be having the season they expected, and Rob Wright deflected anything about it meaning more to him going back to face off against his former program. But let's be real. BYU has to do the simple things right. And the tough part to acknowledge, I think, for many of you out there, is they've not been doing that essentially all of this season. So there's no time like the present for them to fix the things that are affecting them. But at the same time, when it's been essentially different things all season long of very simple matters that have really stopped them from getting to the top of the Big 12, it's going to be easier, like I said, much easier said than done to see them do those things. Maybe focus on one or two of those things. Maybe it's shooting a better percentage from the free throw line. Maybe tomorrow against Baylor, it's limiting the extra offensive possessions via offensive rebounds for the Baylor Bears, who are typically a very good offensive rebounding team under Scott Drew. Focus on simple things. And I think that is what's going to lead BYU to getting more wins and hopefully one of those signature wins down the line. Yes, it's great to have guys like AJ Dybantsa shining. It's great to have Rob Wright doing his thing in the scoring department. But once again, very simple things are proving to be BYU's undoing. And until they fix those simple things, well, they can keep losing. That's the long and short of how things look for BYU basketball right now. Now, BYU football, on the other hand, they are still looking forward to this upcoming football season. But something I noticed watching the Super Bowl yesterday, and it's something that BYU learned firsthand going against Texas Tech this past season. They know what they need to do if they really want to become the program they hope to become. And let's just put it this way, trench warfare is where it all begins. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Winter Games are officially here. If you're anything like me, you're locking in for the events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why I am following the Winter Games on FanDuel. It just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about the most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action all Winter Games long. The drama of curling matches, I have been sucked into curling. I'm a sucker for it, but it starts slow and somehow get intense fast. Speed skating races decided by mere inches. Hockey games, which are already going for the women. Men's will be starting up very, very soon with NHL players finally playing once again. Even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. And that's where FanDuel comes in. They keep the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on. There's no better way to follow them than with our friends at FanDuel. Or, of course, they like to say, FanDuel, you can play your game. Thank you once again for being here on Locked On Cougars. If you want to take this to the next level, if you're what we call a true everydayer, join the Locked On Cougar Everydayer Club. Get inside access to all the intel I've got when it comes to BYU sports. Get access to our members-only Discord server. Get Locked On merch with a discount on top of it. Ad-free audio episodes is all available to you by going to lockedoncougars.supercast.com. That's lockedoncougars.supercast.com. All right, so BYU football obviously had an incredible season, but in their two matchups against the Texas Tech Red Raiders, what proved to be BYU's undoing? And for those of you who are not wanting to pause that long to think about it, I'll just tell you this much. BYU got absolutely manhandled in the trenches, both offensively and defensively, more so when it came to their offensive line, because they went up against probably it's the best in the Big 12. I would venture to say it's one of the top 5 defensive lines in all of college football. I thought for a stretch there last year, Texas Tech's defensive line was about as good as anybody had in all of college football. BYU learned a really, really tough lesson that if you can get beat with 4-man rush, it's going to make your life a living nightmare to try and win football games. If you watched the Super Bowl last night and watch what happened to the New England Patriots, you saw essentially what happened to the BYU Cougars. Speaking of, if you want to use a comparison, the Seattle Seahawks are the Texas Tech Red Raiders, and the Pats are the BYU Cougars. Seattle was able to dominate that game with a front 4. If you could have 4 defenders beat 5 offensive linemen, a tight end, running back, whatever combination of blockers there are, it makes life just absolutely incredibly difficult to win football games. And we saw it from BYU taking on Texas Tech. We saw it from the New England Patriots trying to win another Super Bowl, but ultimately conceding defeat to the Seattle Seahawks. What I noticed from BYU when it came to the transfer portal this last year is they know what they need to do. And I said this, for those of you who are longtime everyday listeners, I said it the night after the Big 12 title game, sitting in my hotel room down there in Arlington, Texas. I have said it time and time again since then, rewatching that game. BYU looked across the field, saw a team that could dominate from start to finish with their defensive line in particular, but also their offensive line made things work for them, speaking of going up against BYU's defensive line. While BYU's betting on continuity with a lot of the young talent they have on their defensive line and expecting that to become the force that it could be, like a Texas Tech or like the Seattle Seahawks, BYU went to the transfer portal and bolstered their offensive front with 3 additional offensive linemen via the transfer portal, with the hopes that that offensive front is going to be far more prepared when it goes up against the likes of a Texas Tech, or heck, if they do make the college football playoff this upcoming year, maybe going up against the Ohio States, the Indianas that have elite defensive line play. It is crazy to think about, and it's something that's not necessarily all that sexy, but trench warfare more and more is at an absolute premium in football. We, speaking of the greater football community, have watched offensive line play deteriorate over the years. And really what it takes to be a good offensive lineman is reps upon reps upon reps, just going at it day after day in practice. But all we have done at the NCAA level, at the NFL level, heck, even at the high school level, is curb the amount of reps offensive linemen can get. And that has led to defensive lines essentially having their way with offensive lines and really making life difficult if you have an elite defensive line for anything successful to happen for your opponent. I expect BYU is going to be better on the offensive line this season. And I'm not saying they were bad last year, but they learned a really, really tough lesson going up against, like I said, Texas Tech. And there were other instances. I thought Arizona gave them some fits. Iowa State at times did as well. Utah, they absolutely did. But I look at this as a proving ground. Kalani Sitake can turn to his guys and say, hey, remember how I talked to you guys about Texas Tech and how they dominated us, speaking to his offensive line, and say, hey, look at what happened to New England. We need to be absolutely elite in terms of our abilities and offensive line to function as a unit. And you probably just heard me talk about the fact that we have seen the curbing of those extra reps for offensive linemen. Well, you know, when you make those up, you make them up this time of year when it comes to individual workouts. You go out there, and while you can't wear pads, you have guys go at you as hard as you possibly can in one-on-one reps in terms of pass blocking. You try and get as many run sets as you possibly can, and you just got to rep it time and time again. And It's not fun. It's not easy. And kind of like the BYU basketball program, when it comes to their defensive woes, you have to find a way to go out there and play the game that you love and rep it time and time again. And if you do that, well, down the line, you become the force that everybody expects you to be. But it's a proving ground. And watching what I watched from BYU going up against the Red Raiders and watching the New England Patriots get absolutely lambasted by a really, really phenomenal Seattle defensive front, I think BYU is endeavoring to become just that. And will they become that? I hope so, because if they do, that means BYU is absolutely going to be a title threat to win the Big 12 conference, to play in the college football playoff, and have everything that they want to accomplish as a football program open to them. They're not that far off. I'm going to be very clear. They're not far off from being a college football playoff caliber team. And in fact, I think a lot of metrics bore out that they probably should have been this past year. But I think this is kind of the one facet. If they really want to become a nationally relevant program and truly compete for national titles and the like, they have got to become just juggernauts in the trenches. And Kalani Sitake talks about it often. He knows what it's going to take. He is watching what happened against Texas Tech. He probably watched that Super Bowl and said, wow, that looks eerily familiar, speaking from the Pats perspective of what happened to his BYU football program. And so long as TJ Woods continues to do what he does, because I think TJ is absolutely elite as an offensive line coach, and I trust that now that Sione Po'uha and Chad Kauha'aha'a are going to take over BYU's defensive line responsibilities, they continue to do their things. The hope is that in time, hopefully as soon as this fall, the BYU will be those bullies in the trenches that can go out there and win games almost single-handedly. Yes, I know you have to score touchdowns with your skill play. I get all that. But trench warfare, former BYU offensive line coach and offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes used the expression all the time, the tip of the spear. If BYU's offensive and defensive lines can become that proverbial tip of the spear, BYU is going to knife through everybody they go up against. And yes, that includes the likes of Texas Tech, because they've seen the blueprint. They have seen exactly the vision of what it's going to take. And in this modern era of football, until we go back kind of against the grain in terms of giving extra reps to offensive linemen, defensive line play, especially getting success with 3- and 4-man rushes, not having to bring extra players to get after the opposing quarterback, they're going to hold a major, major advantage in playing the game that we all love to watch. And I think BYU got a front row seat to it this past season. We saw it in the Super Bowl last night, if you were paying attention. And here's hoping that Kalani Sitake and company, they can get things back on track and live the dreams they hope to have this coming fall. All right, we'll wrap things up coming up next. The Big 12 was finally spurred to action, doing something about what happened at Oklahoma State this past week. Not sure why, it took everything that it took to get there, but all the same, they have finally responded in kind, and it shows that the Big 12, they're maybe finally taking things a little more seriously when it comes to BYU and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Wayfair. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and feels. That's why you guys need to turn to Wayfair. It's a one-stop shop for getting your home back on track, from bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room. Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. They have everything you need for that full home refresh, or all in just one simple room, all in one place. Whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work-from-home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and your budget. Shopping is easy, delivery is smooth, and everything arrives as expected, and honestly makes getting back into a routine this new year a lot more manageable. Get organized, refreshed, and back on track this year for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. That's Wayfair, every style, of course, every home. Today's show is also brought to you by Indeed. Now, hiring is not just about finding someone willing to take the job, it's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed sponsored jobs is the move to make, because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, skills, certification, even location. And obviously, you just don't want someone who can help your job. You want somebody with real experience who can jump right in and further what you're doing at your job or your company. That's what I like about Indeed. You get specific and target. You can get specific with your qualifications and target exactly what you need. And with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I have been talking to you about Indeed, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who actually check all of your boxes, and do it with Indeed sponsored jobs. Thank you for being here on Locked On Cougars. Please continue to subscribe, rate, and review, and share this with your family and friends. If you're watching this on YouTube Live, click that little thumbs up icon, click the bell notification icon, so that way you like the show, and also enable notifications when a new show drops. You can be on it right from the get-go and be among the first to get all that you crave when it comes to BYU sports. All right. If you missed it yesterday, the Big 12 responded to what happened at Oklahoma State this past week, Wednesday night in particular, when, according to Oklahoma State fans, they were chanting "Refs a Mormon." Kevin Young, speaking of BYU men's basketball coach, claimed that they were chanting "F the Mormons." But no matter what it was, the Big 12 has decided that enough is enough when it comes to BYU being bullied by opposing fan bases. And as I've talked about on this podcast a number of times over the past week, finally, they're doing something about it and getting serious about this. Now, some of you may acknowledge, and I don't necessarily think that 50 grand is going to completely curb everything that we're hoping it will curb. But the Big 12 announcement said that in accordance with the Big 12 conference principles and standards of sportsmanship, the conference has issued Oklahoma State University a $50,000 fine following its investigation into an inappropriate chants which referenced the Mormon religion that occurred during Wednesday's men's basketball game. The Big 12 conference will not tolerate any behavior that targets or demeans others, unquote. The Big 12 shortly thereafter announced their own statement saying this: the university conducted an immediate investigation into the allegation that a group of students used an inappropriate chant during last Wednesday's men's basketball game between OSU and BYU. It was determined that a derogatory chant followed a disputed call and referenced the Mormon faith in relation to game officials. So they are saying that the refs a Mormon statement is what was the actual chant. So there we go. The reference to religion did not meet our standards and expectations. Oklahoma State respects the Big 12's decision and will not appeal the fine. The Cowboy Code calls us to treat others with respect and dignity. Oklahoma State University's values the relationship we have with BYU and deeply respects its community and faith. We will continue to work to ensure that the atmosphere at our events reflects the values of the Cowboy family, unquote. All right, so I love the fact that the Big 12 was spurred to action finally, and it may have taken some, bully pulpit type stuff from yours truly and others out there to say, hey, what is it going to take here? Because remember, thinking back to last year, the Cincinnati game, and the situation around that was horrific because it was obviously a family that was a part of the Grand Blank shooting that attended that game and wrote a heartbreaking letter to the University of Cincinnati. And I know Cincinnati apologized, but really no meaningful action was taken by the Big 12. And in the Big 12 title game, Brett Yormark was asked about the inaction, said, hey, we take things seriously in the Big 12 conference. Then we had what happened in basketball with Oklahoma State. And I think that the conference is just fed up with what's happening because BYU does not necessarily expect to be treated special or treated any differently than anybody else in the Big 12 conference. All BYU is asking for, and I'm asking for, is for them to be treated the same way that every other religion, creed, protected class, race are treated in the greater world. Yes, that's what we're asking for, just common decency. I know that Mormons have been a punching bag for literally since the religion was founded 200 plus years ago. The situation at hand, though, is that we are looking at this through the prism of, hey, this wouldn't fly with anybody else. And I know I'm going to get people in the mention saying, Jake, get some thicker skin. We need to be thicker skinned people as members of the LDS faith. But I'll reiterate something here. Words have power. Words spur actions. Words, obviously, can cause a lot to happen in this world that we're in. And it's a very, very divided world. I don't need to talk any more than what I've already talked on that front. But I appreciate the fact that Brett Yormark and the Big 12 Conference took this serious enough to hit Oklahoma State where it hurts and in their pocketbook. And like I said, 50 grand, they may say, oh, you want to cash your check, but it's a gesture that honestly has been lacking since the Colorado incident. And we've seen multiple incidences since then of profane chants directed at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its members. So while I understand that some of you may think that, hey, we just need to move past this and just, I think a couple of you said, just win. It's happening even when BYU's winning. So I appreciate the fact that Brett Yormark and the people at the Big 12 Conference, the administrators there, said, you know what, enough's enough. Will it finally stamp things out here? I don't know that it will. I hope it does. And I think that we've seen comments from guys like Brian Santiago who said that the other Big 12 athletic directors are keenly aware of the situation. But it kind of screams to me that everybody else in the Big 12 Conference needs to do what Texas Tech has done. I have got mad respect for the Red Raiders because during the football game this past year, that was not too long after what happened at Colorado. It was actually before the Cincinnati incident, but they had Grant McCaslin, the men's basketball coach, out on the field pregame saying, hey, none of this crap, none of what happened at Colorado, it's not happening here. Then during the basketball game, when BYU went to Lubbock earlier this basketball season, they had who am I thinking of? Their football coach. His name escaped me all of a sudden. It's on the tip of my tongue. But he gets out there and says, hey, kind of what Coach McCaslin said. Joey McGuire. There we go. It came finally. Joey McGuire got out there and said, hey, we are not going to do that. We're better than that. Let's keep it about us. Let's make it about us. Speaking of Red Raider fans, we don't need to make it about BYU or their religion. That's the right way to approach it. And yes, these are young, sometimes inebriated young people who don't have a lot of life experience. I get all that. But once again, this wouldn't be tolerated by anybody else for any other religion, like I said, protected class, race, any of that. For some reason, it's been fair game. But I'm glad the Big taking meaningful steps to handling this and hopefully stamping it out. But I do think it's going to take a proactive effort from other members of the Big 12 Conference following the lead of Texas Tech, because I think Texas Tech has approached it the right way. Having their coaches, having figureheads who these students and fans respect and obviously revere in many respects, and say, none of that, cut it out. So I hope that at Baylor tomorrow, I don't expect it to happen with Baylor, because I think Baylor is a religiously minded institution, understands what this is all about. But even then, you could have Dave Aranda there at the game and say, guys, keep it about the Baylor Bears. You coming up when BYU faces any other opponent. That's how it should be handled, at least in my opinion. I think it's a very proactive way to go about it. And I think what we've seen from Texas Tech is it's curbed what could have been a lot of pretty derogatory behavior directed at BYU. So, yeah, I respect and I appreciate the fact that the Big 12 finally took a stand on it. While some of you may want it to be more punitive in terms of actually assessing a technical foul, forcing the student section to vacate the premise, I get all that, but it's not currently on the books in terms of what the sportsmanship code the Big 12 has. The only thing they can do really right now is fine programs. So hopefully those fines will continue to escalate if more incidences happen like this, but it's my sincere hope that I'm done talking about this for the time being. But as I said previously, I will keep talking about it as long as it keeps happening, because it's not okay and it wouldn't be tolerated for anybody else. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. Hope you guys are having a fantastic Monday whenever you listen and or watch this. Thank you, as always, for your support of the podcast. Thank you for making it your first listen of the day. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to get you ready for BYU and Baylor, expecting to catch up with our good friend Cam Stewart, host of Locked On Baylor. We'll have a little crossover edition for you guys, previewing that game. Maybe even talk some football as well, because, you know, Baylor got a big-time quarterback via the transfer portal, and DJ Lagway. We'll get into that. And as always, you can find the show on social media, Locked On Cougars on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You want my stuff, just follow me, Jacob C. Hatch, on Instagram or on X, aka Twitter. And if you never miss an episode, the Everyday Club is built for you. Get Locked On Cougars ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedoncougars.supercast.com to join the club today. For those of you on video now, we're going to send you over to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel for more incredible Locked On content, or on audio. Make sure you make your second listen to the Locked On College Football Show with Spencer McLaughlin. McLaughlin doing a great job covering all things college football. And as always, come back tomorrow and be an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.